From the DMZ to the NATO front, this is CRN.
Hello, and welcome to the Kershner Files. Well, hello, and welcome to the Kershner Files. I am your host, coming to you from the Contra Radio Network studios. This is episode 12. We are in the middle of week 145 of the illegitimate, fraudulently elected Ding Dong and his tyrannical reign. And we have 369 days to the next election. I got my mask. I transcribed the numbers incorrectly during the lightning round. I said 170, and I was like, that doesn't sound right. Then I spent 5 minutes trying to find the right number, and I had some serious editing to do. So, okay, let's see. We got some updates. I am about 200 pages into my next standalone piece of fiction. It will not be a series. I will bring it to a conclusion. I don't care if it is going to be 400 or 500 pages. I'm not doing another series. So, I have just introduced the face of the protagonist group that is closely modeled on current events. Namely, the World Economic Forum, BlackRock, Vanguard, and the like. So, I'm having a lot of fun with that. Actually, the inspiration came from a friend of mine. He's pretty high up in the food chain at one of these companies here, and he recently took a business trip, and I said, "Oh, what took you to this location?" And he refused to answer. So he said, we just went and got taquiatos or something like that. I was like, dude, what were you doing in this city, in that country, that for your employer? That doesn't make any sense. None of these things are aligning. And then he didn't answer. He didn't give me a straight answer as to what he was doing. You know, possibly it was something, business related that's not public knowledge yet. Could be. But that put my overly creative mind into overdrive, and I was like, oh, he's got to be the face of some subgroup within the World Economic Forum, and blah, 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 blah. And I went nuts. And I'm having a great time. So I've just introduced that character. I'm having a good time. I was contemplating actually just reading that opening 6 pages where I introduce the character. I introduce kind of this nefarious group that he's a part of. But I don't know. I might still do it. And I have begun the process of collecting DIYs, home remedies, poultices, salves, tinctures, to begin the process of creating a second part to my home remedies, poultices, salves, and tinctures book that's selling quite well. Everybody seems to enjoy it. I think I'm going to weave in. The premise of that book was basically this show. It's about becoming more prepared, and it's about becoming more self-sufficient. It's about walking away from big pharma, and I think what I'm going to do in part 2 is begin walking away from big ag. So there's going to be a lot of old-timey recipes from the Great Depression, the Civil War. It's going to be about foraging. It's going to be about composting and gardening and just helping people, not necessarily quote-unquote homestead, but you could do an urban homestead and go down that route. And so I've begun putting these things together. So if you would like to have something of yours included in part 2 of the Home Remedies, Poultices, Salves, and Tinctures book that I'm currently writing, feel free to send your information to me with whatever it is you think you might like to see included, and I'll take a look at it and let you know what I think. And you can send that to djkpublishinghouse@gmail.com. Or you can go to my website and enter a comment, and I'll get those either way. So, something to think about. Speaking of urban farmsteads, homesteads, people that are like me, that have, you know, very little land, but if you use that land wisely and you cultivate it appropriately, based off of your cold hardiness zone, you can accomplish a great many things. I bring this up because I was going through, I don't know what it was, Instagram last night. Yeah, last night. And because I am following all kinds of other homestead farming related accounts, this one popped up, and it's called Urban Farmstead. And I'll put the link to his YouTube channel in my show notes. And the thing that caught my eye was basically he's advertising that he's posted a 33-minute video with the first ever tour of his garden. The gentleman's name is Kyle, and he lives out near Sacramento, California. And he has basically walked away from Big Ag, which is kind of where I'm headed with part 2 of Home Remedies, Poultices, Salves, and Tinctures. And so what he has done, based off of obviously his cold hardiness zone, he's planted a variety of trees and shrubs that will provide him, and vegetables, that will provide him sustenance year-round. So he's got a bunch of different videos here on his YouTube channel. Summer pruning, like for example, here's the top 6 that show up. Obviously his first ever home orchard tour, that's 21 minutes. His tour of his new garden, creating a garden space, how to prune fruit trees, summer garden tour, and summer fruit tree pruning. And he's got a bunch of them in here. So like I said, I'll put the link to his YouTube channel in my show notes, and you guys can go check it out. I enjoyed the video. I found it very, very rewarding, actually. He had a lot of information in there explaining kind of his thought process on why he planted what he planted. I don't know what the cold hardiness zone is in Sacramento, but I believe it's a little bit different than Ohio, so I would have to make some adjustments. But you get the point. All right. We've got survival realty updates. So we've got a secluded cabin on 10 acres in Lenoir, North Carolina. That is some beautiful country if you've never been to Lenoir. It is absolutely beautiful. And the write-up on this says, escape to your own secluded retreat in this charming cabin nestled in the woods. With its off-grid living, you'll experience tranquility and eco-friendly living, embrace the simplicity of solar or generator power, and enjoy the beauty of nature. Don't miss out on this one-of-a-kind opportunity located on 10 acres in Lenoir, North Carolina. And I'm looking at this picture, and I would say to you, this looks like my friend's cabin who lives in Lenoir, North Carolina. He is one of the higher ranking officers in the North Carolina Department of Wildlife. And I went to his wedding. I was one of his groomsmen. And this house looks almost exactly like the house where the wedding took place, which was basically his front yard. So, wow, that's eerie how much of a resemblance this house has. Let's see. The next one is a custom home on 38 acres in Oatman, Arizona. Remote living in luxury, 38 acres with 2,600 square foot custom home. This home has a good well. Power has been brought to service property. The property has great solar exposure. Well, you're in Arizona and there's no trees taller than 1 story. Yeah! I would expect you to have good solar exposure. 3 bedroom, 3 bath. The views are amazing. The sounds of nature and the dark skies all bring peace and relaxation. Close to the historic town of Oatman, Arizona. The gold rush of the desert. Well, they could have just said that. I don't know. So those are the 3 properties. No, what's the other one? Oh, I'm sorry. The third property is in New Lisbon, Wisconsin. It's a 10-acre homestead for $369,000. And it says, enjoy a beautiful park-like setting with an inviting 2-bed, 2-bath home nestled on 10 acres of pines and oaks. This is a nice turnkey homestead ready for your large and small animals. 4 fenced pastures to rotate livestock and a custom chicken coop. There you go. Established orchard, mated vegetable garden, medicinal garden, and commercial greenhouse. Well, look at them. $369,000 for 10 acres in New Lisbon, Wisconsin. There you go. All right, so we've got a bunch of stuff to run through. I've got 3 videos, and we've got some articles and some topics to go over. Oh! I forgot! So, my new-to-me truck is a 2005 Chevy Silverado. And I was driving it, I don't know, about 3 weeks ago. My daughter flew home and I was driving to the airport and my headlights started dimming or flickering, you know, kind of like, so something was going on. And I took it over to Advanced Auto Parts and I had them throw it on the computer and they were like, well, your alternator, starter, and battery all check out. Not satisfied with that answer, I called a buddy of mine who works with heavy machinery and does all kinds of work on his own trucks, whether they be big diesel dump trucks or, you know, backhoes or his own, you know, work trucks that are pulling trailers, things like that. And he said, dude, that's your alternator. I was like, okay. So I took it to 2 shops here in Columbus, and sure enough, they were like, that sounds like an alternator. Then they told me that the alternator was going to cost $300, and it was probably they were going to charge, at a minimum, a 1-hour rate at $120 an hour. That was assuming that it was just the alternator and it wasn't a faulty ground wire or some other electrical issue. Undeterred, I went online and searched for a video on YouTube, how to replace a alternator in a 2005 Chevy Silverado. Sure enough, bloop, came right up. 5-minute video, literally 6 steps. Take the negative off the battery, take the wire off the back of the alternator, put your wrench on the auto tensioner, turn clockwise, remove the serpentine belt, undo the 2 bolts on the alternator. Basically need a pry bar to get the stinking thing out. Then once you have it out, there's another electrical wire that's got a clip on it. So you just pop that. You pull that, you put the new one in, do everything in reverse order. And I did it! I spent $250, $275 after tax or whatever on a new alternator. I set a timer, and it took me 37 minutes to do it. And when I was done, I got to tell you, I felt pretty good. I haven't worked on a vehicle since I had a 1999 Jeep Wrangler. And to this day, I still regret selling it in 2009. But I used to work on that all the time. Put it up on jacks, change the differential oil, change the radiator, change all kinds of stuff. I did all kinds of work on this thing. And for some reason, it's been 14 years since I actually worked on a vehicle because all of the vehicles we have are newer and the engines are sideways and I don't have specialized tools. When I was done, I had such a sense of accomplishment and a sense of manliness, and the only thought running through my head was this.
I'm feeling the effects of masculinity right now. I feel the testosterone. I want to go to war! I want a lightsaber! I'm a man! War! I'm feeling the effects of masculinity right now.
That's what I literally came into the house and I was like, yeah! And my wife is like, what is wrong with you? I was like, I just changed the alternator. I'm ready to go to war. And she was like, you're a loon. I thought I'd share that with you. I thought it was a good time, you know. Hey, 37 minutes start to finish. I still feel really good about it. I need a lightsaber! You know, it was great. I loved it. I just scared the dog. She's going to run off now. All right. We're going to get to some videos and we'll get the show going. I've already blown 15 minutes. All right. It's going to be a good time. All right, here we go. All right, so this first video is about a man. He's in the grocery store and he's explaining to you the differences between garlic. So you've got Chinese garlic and you've got regular garlic. And I saw this video. It's been sitting in my email, and I was when he told me about Chinese garlic, I was just, oh my God. Here, watch this.
You're most likely buying Chinese garlic, which is a really bad thing, and I'm about to show you why. Firstly, Chinese garlic is grown in sewer water, which is high in lead, other heavy metals, and it's just disgusting. The second thing is, real garlic naturally has dark spots. The reason why this garlic is so white is because it's artificially bleached with chlorine. Now, how do you tell if it's Chinese garlic or real garlic? You look at the bottom. Chinese garlic has no roots, whereas real garlic has roots. And the second thing you're going to do is you're going to look at the label and look at this one. You can barely read it that it's made in China. Stop buying the Chinese garlic, buy real garlic, and support your local farmers.
So, if there was ever a reason for you to grow your own garlic, the fact that Chinese garlic is grown in sewer water full of heavy metals, I don't know what else is. So the trick with garlic is basically you need to plant it about a month before your first really hard frost. I'm getting down to the wire here. They're supposed to be calling for frost here by the end of the week. I might be a little behind, but I think if I can get the garlic in the ground today or tomorrow and get it strawed over, I think we'll be okay for garlic for next year. So anyway, grow your own garlic, folks. Don't buy this stuff at the grocery store. It's just disgusting. All right, I got another video for you, and this one is a cough syrup recipe. I'll play the video, but basically, you're gonna take a pint size pint size mason jar. You're gonna fill that with 2 cut up onions, and then you're gonna pour a bottle of honey over top, and then you're gonna seal it and just set it on your counter. And then half a day later, you can take teaspoons of the honey, which has extracted a lot of the medicinal qualities of the onion into the honey, and then you can take the honey as a cough syrup. So here's this video.
Do you know what happens if you pour honey over onions? Chances are your grandparents knew very well. They might have even made this remedy as it was common knowledge 70 years ago. The honey will begin to ferment and extract the onion's anti-inflammatory substances. Onions also contain allicin, a powerful natural antibiotic that is effective against throat and lung infections. Leave the jar on your kitchen counter. In about 12 hours, your medicinal syrup will be ready. You should make it at the first sign of a cold or flu, or if you're dealing with a stubborn cough. I'm sure you'll have no trouble getting a hold of the 2 ingredients. Take it by the teaspoon until symptoms subside.
And my third video, I thought I would do something different. So instead of recipes, I found a video about, it's a homemade recurve bow, basically. And this gentleman has built a bow out of, looks like 1-inch PVC. And then he's got a draw weight scale. And with just PVC and the bowstring, it came out to about 27 pounds of draw weight. And then, so then he takes these, you've seen those orange driveway stakes or driveway markers. They're usually about 3-4 feet tall, usually about 4 feet tall. And what he does is he tapes 3 of them together and slides it into the PVC, and then gets that kind of secured in place so it doesn't move around on them. You can, and he also tells you can use other materials. And once he puts in those 3 taped together driveway stakes, the draw weight goes up by 20 pounds. It goes up to 47 pounds. You can then use a PVC longbow or recurve bow, basically, and you can now go hunting with PVC. This is a survival thing, and I thought you guys might enjoy seeing the video. I've told you all about it. He's going to say the exact same thing I just did, but at least you can hear him explain it. So here's that.
Hopefully by now you've got a chance to build one of these improvised PVC survival bows. As it is, this PVC bow has a draw weight of a little over 27 pounds. We're going to increase the draw weight on this. We can get this up to legal hunting weight. To get this done today, we're going to be using driveway stakes. There's a lot of other options you can use. A broken arrow is going to work, as well as an older broken fishing rod. Driveway stakes are kind of sloppy in here, so we're going to need to make essentially a bushing to hold it in place. Not too tight, but enough where it doesn't slip out. So we're going to use a little bit of duct tape off of the spool tool. This fiberglass is not that hard to cut. Any of the carts that feature a saw is going to be able to cut these with ease. I'm going to give this a couple wraps. Yeah, 47 pounds. That's a real bow there. That bow's got a lot of zip to it. I know what project you're doing this weekend.
Have you or someone you know ever had a hard drive crash? Or maybe your cell phone or tablet died, taking all of your pictures with it. You've thought about backing up your data, but all of the plans out there cost too much money for just a little bit of storage space. Well, now there's a solution. Got Backup? That's right, Got Backup will allow you to back up unlimited devices, up to 6 terabytes of data for only $9.97 a month. And that's not all. You can earn commissions by referring friends and family too. Got Backup is the only data storage center that allows you to earn income on your referrals. Check out Got Backup now. Log on to john-jeffers.com. That's john-jeffers.com. Log on now.
And now we pause for some shameless self-promotion. If you like post-apocalyptic, dystopian, and preparedness fiction as much as I like writing it, or you just like the show and are curious to see how creative my mind can be, then pick up my 5-part fictional series today. In a nutshell, over the course of When Rome Stumbles, Hannibal is at the Gates, By the Dawn's Early Light, Colder Weather, and A Time for Reckoning, I crash the big ag and financial industries, unleash some jihadists and an EMP, then spend 20 years trying to evade a socialist dictator. You can get all 5 parts in electronic format from my overlords at Amazon for $20. Paperback pricing is set to Amazon minimums based on page count, so I can't help you there, but for the bibliophiles out there, each part of the series averages about $15. If you don't have the time to just sit and read, you can find all 5 parts in audio format too. Audio pricing is set to Amazon minimums based on recorded finished product length. But I have freebie codes, so shoot me an email at djkpublishinghouse@gmail.com to get your freebie codes today. Don't wait. Get a copy of each part of this exciting and action-packed series today. You will not be disappointed. And now, back to the show. All right, now let's get to some articles, things that they're preparedness related, and I thought, you know what? That would be something really interesting if it happened in the United States. So this first one here comes from Switzerland. And what Switzerland has done is they have mailed iodine tablets to 5 million residents in case of nuclear disaster, with the postage saying, "Take at the request of authorities." And it might sound like the Swiss are thinking, well, you know, nuclear war, you know, fallout, contaminated this, that, or the other. And Switzerland, come on, they're neutral. Well, they have been doing this apparently for some time. And iodine tablets are in the mail to millions of Swiss citizens as part of the country's preparation for a disaster at one of its nuclear power plants. In 2014, about 4.6 million potassium iodide tablets were sent out, with a 10-year lifespan. They're now expiring. So everyone living within 50 kilometers of one of the country's 3 nuclear power plants will get their iodine tablets in the mail. That totals about 4 million people, according to the website Jodtabletten. The total is down from 2014 because one nuclear power plant in Mühlberg has been shut down. I just thought that this was really interesting, and it would... I mean, can you imagine if anybody living within 50 miles or 50 kilometers of a nuclear power plant in the United States just received unsolicited iodide tablets from the U.S. government? Can you imagine the panic that that would cause if they didn't tell you that this was all going, that this was just a precaution in case there was some kind of problem at the nuclear power plant? I mean, we got nuclear power plants around like major cities that have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 million people living in it. Can you imagine if the U.S. government sent out potassium iodide tablets to those people living within 50 miles or 50 kilometers of a nuclear power plant, or Yucca Mountain, or whatever, you know, any place that there was nuclear material? That's crazy. But I guess in Switzerland it's a thing. So I just thought it was really interesting. So, you know, you might want to go out and get your potassium iodide. I don't know. It's up to you. The next one I have is, do you remember the flack that this kid got outside of Colorado Springs because he had a Gadsen flag on his backpack, and the teacher went apoplectic because she thought that flag was had historical relevance or had some sort of historical reference to slavery? Well, guess what? The kid and his family are now suing the Colorado School District, alleging First Amendment violations. And this is a short little article, but I think it's freaking great. These school districts need to be brought to heel. And if you have the capacity to homeschool, I would seriously consider it. I really would. Because this kind of crap is getting out of hand. People that don't know their own nation's history go on some sort of tirade and an overreaction because they don't know anything about anything, and then they're going to kick this kid out because he's got a Gadsen flag. He has a couple other things on his backpack which they have strictly forbidden, and they're not even going to entertain. He had a couple patches for the Firearms Policy Coalition insignia, and that showed a semi-automatic rifle, and he also had 3 Pac-Man ghosts holding guns. So the school district said, we're never going to let you bring those into our school district again. But they're now being sued for First Amendment violations. So I think it's great. I think this kid has a legitimate case. He's got a legitimate axe to grind, and Harrison School District 2 in Colorado Springs is about to have to fork over some serious pesos to this kid and his family because they don't know their own frickin' country's history. I don't know. Next. This one's absolutely disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. I seriously, and I can't always find the right words. I most fervently beg you to go find your own food, particularly your own meats, whether that's Buckeye Valley Co-op or something like that in your state. This article is going to make you want to puke. Tyson Foods, which we know is a big, chicken manufacturer here in the U.S., they are investing big money in a bug protein new venture. The first bug protein facility of its kind will be used to make food for pets, fish, and livestock. This is going to make you just want to go. Tyson Foods is partnering with a Dutch bug protein company to bring insect farming to the United States using livestock waste as feed. Earlier this month, meat-producing giant Tyson Foods announced its investment in insect protein producer Protix and said it's partnering with the Netherlands-based company to build a facility in the United States that will raise insects. The bug protein won't be used for human consumption, wink wink, at this point. Instead, the facility will use animal waste from Tyson cattle to feed black soldier flies, which will then be processed into food for pets, livestock, and fish. Today, we're focused on more of an ingredient application with insect protein than we are with a consumer application. So basically, they're saying consumer is coming next. We're going to get the science perfected with our livestock and our aquatic life. And then once we get that figured out, hot dog, we're going to start slipping it into our chicken and into our beef. And we're going to make like little vegan veggie patties made of flies. I don't know if that's even, is that vegetarian? I don't know. Is a fly considered a meat source? It's got protein. But I read this and I just went, you've got to be kidding. It won't be used for human consumption, and we're focused on more of an ingredient application and not a consumer one. But, hey, consumers coming later. They went on to say Tyson Foods' minority stake in Protix will help the leading insect ingredients company fund its global expansion, according to a U.S. company's press release. The facility is expected to open in 2025. The insect life cycle provides the opportunity for full circulatory within our value chain, strengthening our commitment to building a more sustainable food system for the future. And there you have it, folks. They want us to start eating bugs for climate change. Is this preparedness related? You betcha. Because if you are not sourcing your meat, I don't care if it's pork, chicken, beef, duck, turkey, goat, lamb, I don't care. If you're not sourcing your own meat, this is what's in store for you in the future. Get it figured out, folks, because you're about to start eating bug burgers. Not going to do it. And then lastly, I have an article here about how to make your house invisible after SHTF. And it's got interesting points. The first one is, using paint colors. No, they're not saying paint your house in camouflage, but they're saying use paint colors that are appealing, but also will help your home blend into the background so it's not as easily noticeable. Avoid white trim paint around your windows, and use muted colors of greens and grays and maybe some browns. And then beyond that, they're talking about using camouflage netting. So if SHTF actually occurs, if you've got some camouflage netting, that'll help break up the silhouette of the house, keep it from being able to be kind of spotted from the air. using satellite or reconnaissance. You know, you can string things up. So that was just part of it. And then the rest of it is, I don't know. Those seem far-fetched, but they're valid. So I want to make sure I present them to you. The next two things are power, food, and security. So for power, and this is about light and noise discipline. So if you've got a generator, people are going to hear it, and they're going to start coming toward that sound. If you have your curtains open and all of your lights are on and nobody around you has power, you're lit up like a freaking Christmas tree. People are going to start coming over. You need to have light and noise discipline. That's all part of the power. So you need, maybe you want some blackout curtains. I actually had a dream about this the other night, and not so much, more like a daydream, because of the fiction book that I'm writing. I'm getting really creative, and I remember seeing a video where somebody attached a car muffler to a 4-cycle generator and basically nullified all of the noise from that generator. And I want to go find that, because I want to see how, you know, is it true? Is this a bogus claim? Is there some applicability to this? You know, can you actually attach, if you've got the welding skills and you can fashion a little manifold for that car muffler to attach to the actual exhaust muffler, exhaust port on the generator, can you use a car muffler to basically nullify your generator to the point where it just sounds like a running car, which you can't really hear from very far anyway? So that's something that I'm going to go research, and if I find it, maybe I'll present it next Wednesday. But these are the types of things that my crazy brain is coming up with. And then the second thing here is food, and here's what they say: all that canned food you have in the basement won't be obvious to anyone passing by. But what about the vegetable gardens and the livestock? Keep those out of sight of the road if possible. If you can't keep them out of sight, try to disguise them. Plant taller plants around vegetable gardens, even something simple as bamboo or long grass. We used to grow pampas grass or sawgrass when I lived in North Carolina. They're fast growing. They take up, they help shield large areas. I mean, you get the root on that thing is easily 18 to 24 inches in diameter. I mean, you get those things going pretty good. I mean, and then when they come up and they kind of fall out, there's a good 6 to 8 foot diameter on some of these big tall grasses, so that might be helpful. And then what else did they say? Plant taller trees. Disguise a chicken coop as a shed. That's the sort that looks like it might fall down if somebody sneezed nearby, not a sturdy one that might have valuables in it. And then there's security, and obviously, you know, if you're putting up barbed wire or you've got a roll of concertina wire, that might be a giveaway. So they say instead, plant thorny bushes wherever you would have planted barbed wire. So, you know, ring your house in blackberries and roses and the like, something that's got a lot of thorns in it that makes people just not want to go through that. So, I mean, that's something that you can do. It's a good idea to patrol your property at least daily. Check for signs of intruders. Don't be obvious about it. If you walk the perimeter in full tactical gear, you're going to draw attention. Instead, look shabby and pretend you're foraging for edible weeds. Anyone who sees you will assume you're at least as bad off as they are, and they certainly won't assume that you have plenty of food stockpiled in the house. Here's something else, though. If your neighbors are without power and you've got power, right, so you want to hide that. But if you've got a solar panel on your well pump and you've still got running water to bathe, you've got running water to use the facilities inside the house, you've got your septic tank and field and all of that, your neighbors over time are going to start to look more and more disheveled. They're going to look dirty. They're going to look gone. So what I would tell you to do is basically keep an outfit that you use on a daily basis, or at least a few times a week. Get it, get it dirty, get it shabby, so that you look like your peers that have nothing. That'll help you with the immediate observation when it comes to clothing. Men and women that aren't able to shower are going to look more and more disheveled. They're going to be growing beards. Their hairs are going to get a little knotted. It's not going to be washed and kind of kept up to what you would normally do on a daily basis. So maybe you want to get some wigs. Now we're talking about play acting here. You're just trying to keep people out of your house and away from your supplies. So maybe you want to think about getting a wig or two. Maybe you want to grow a beard. But for you to look as gaunt as your neighbors, now you're talking about makeup. Now you're going full actor on this one, all right? But you might have to go that far to make sure nobody's coming for you. You need to look the part. I don't know. These are things that just popped in my head as I read this article. You don't want to draw attention to yourself, so you want to look like everybody else. That means your clothing needs to match your disheveled appearance, dirty face, beard, your hair's growing out. You're going to smell, because you're not going to have showered. You're not supposed to be showering, and everybody else is, but they're going to be lacking calories. They're going to be lacking sustenance. So the only way to replicate that is with makeup. So these are just things that popped in my head. And so there you have it. How to make your house invisible, but I also kind of gave you a gray man how to make yourself invisible applicability to that topic. So, all right, folks, that's the show for today. We covered a lot. I feel very good. Oh, I got one more thing. Now that we're fully into fall and we're getting close to winter, my wife and I've been pushing her to do this because it's something fun to do. We're empty nesters, and it might be something fun. We get to go outside, we get to do stuff together, and this is orienteering. So there are little clubs and things that you can do in your state. They have little competitions. They have, these people are dressed up like they have like matching teams. I don't know if they're running or if they're just really nerdy and they have like a team uniform or something that they wear. But if you go to orienteeringusa.org, you can go in and find a club near you. And so I thought it would be interesting. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 of them in California. In the Four Corners states, there's one in Salt Lake, one in Phoenix, one in Tucson, Albuquerque, Denver, and there's one way out in the middle of nowhere, west of Colorado Springs, near Telluride. There's a couple there's one in Missoula, 3 in Washington. I'm sorry, 2 in Washington, Spokane and Seattle, one in Portland, one in Boise. So your Pacific Northwest is there. There's one here just west of Cheyenne in Laramie. And then when you get closer to the East Coast, as soon as you cross the Mississippi, there's practically one in every state. There's 5 in Ohio, shockingly. There's one in Northwest Indianapolis. There's 2 in Louisville, one in Lexington, one in Nashville, Charlotte, Raleigh, Richmond, D.C., Johnstown, PA. There's one here, looks like near Pottstown, PA, New Brunswick. There's actually one on Long Island, Spring Valley, New York, West Point, Bethel, Connecticut, a couple in Massachusetts. But anyway, the point is, go to orienteeringusa.org, and you know, this is a really fun activity to take your kids on. It's got preparedness applications to it. You need these kids and yourselves to be able to read maps and take a heading and be able to follow an azimuth and do all these things. But you can do it in a group exercise. You can do it for fun. They won't even realize that they're learning something useful. So I don't know. This came up in my email, and I was like, oh yeah, orienteering. I got to talk about that. We talked about a ton of stuff today. I hope you were paying attention. Man, that was, I went through all that pretty quick, and I feel good about that. 40 minutes, not bad. All right, folks, I'll be back on the weekend with another installment of the Lightning Round, episode 151. And we will review the week that was, and I'm sure there will be no shortage of topics with the potato-in-chief still shuffling around the White House, absorbing all of the grandeur of his illegitimate fraudulent election. Ha! That guy. 369 days, folks. We're getting close. All right. Be good, stay safe, keep your head on a swivel. I'm out.
Happy Hunger Games. And may the odds be ever in your favor.